Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CLIU 21 Literacy Series. My name is Tony Marabito, and I am a staff development facilitator here at the IU. Today, we will be diving into the topic of background knowledge. If you have any questions or concerns after watching this recording, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If you'd like assistance with some of the tools that I will be presenting, please email me to schedule a time to Zoom and I can walk you through how to use the tool and answer any questions that you may have. I will also be providing the link to the slide deck below the video so you can access it whenever you wish. All right, let's get started. So here is our agenda for the day. We will start with methodology. Why should you activate background knowledge? Then we'll move on to assessing background knowledge to find out exactly what your students know before you start teaching the topic. Then we'll move on to building background knowledge, where I will give you a few examples of how you could do this in your classroom, and this could be used at all levels, K to 12. And lastly, I'll wrap up with a conclusion and show you a few tools that I have used to help build background knowledge in my classroom. All right, first, we will go over some methodology and some research about providing background knowledge and building background knowledge. All right, I wanted to share some research with you to stress the importance of providing background knowledge to your students. So first bullet point there, brain research from Carnegie Mellon psychologists confirm that it's easier to learn something new when we attach it to something we already know. Next, prior knowledge activation is a critical step in the learning process and a major factor in reading comprehension. That goes for early learners and secondary as well. And then lastly here, the more you know about the topic, the easier it is to read a text, understand it, and retain information. I won't take the time now. However, I did provide a link for each one of these articles. So if you wanted to take a look, I do have each link attached to this slide deck. So new information is easier to learn when composed of familiar events. There's a great little study that was done here at Carnegie Mellon, and it really does go over the importance of background knowledge, and it is some great research. So I would encourage you to read that. Here is the journal article that I used as well and the abstract for you. And then lastly, Reading Rockets. This was a great resource for me when putting together this presentation. I would encourage you to read this as well. All right, so why is background knowledge so important? I will just read this to you very quickly. It makes good sense to comprehend a story or text. Readers will need a threshold of knowledge about the topic. Sometimes we call it domain-specific knowledge or topical knowledge. Without such knowledge, it becomes difficult to construct a meaningful mental model of what the text is about. And this goes, again, for all learners. When reading a story to a younger set of students, you might want to provide some background knowledge, some vocabulary, paint a picture of where the story takes place, just to get their minds engaged and to take their pulse as to what they know about the topic before you start reading. And that can go really K to 12. If you're diving in a little bit deeper, maybe in something in social studies, painting in the upper grades, painting a picture of the time era, what was going on at that specific period in time. This could really help students grasp what you're trying to teach them. All right, so here's a sports example that I wanted to share with you. Let's think about the word operation. So it's a multiple meaning word. There's many multiple meaning words in our English language. But if you think of it in a sports example, if you were to read the word in a sports article, let's just say about the Yankees, you might think about Derek Jeter recovering from his latest baseball injury, or an operation of Tiger Woods just having back surgery again. However, provide that same word, operation, and use it in math context. You think about mathematical processes like multiplication or division, addition, subtraction, words that have multiple purposes and meanings, and their meanings in particular instances are cued by the reader's knowledge. So if they only understood operation in a context with a doctor being involved, or in a math context, that's going to throw off their understanding. Here's another example. Women's suffrage. So I just want to point this picture out to you, figure 2.1, and I have also linked this in the presentation for you if you'd like to check this out. But background knowledge is an essential component to learning this, because you have to really understand the context of this figure. So I just want to paint this picture for you. There's a row of men with their backs to the camera, reading through information in front of a building with the sign, National Association Headquarters Opposed to Women's Suffrage. So again, I'm gearing this a little bit more towards our older readers. However, you'll understand the context in a second. To the right is a woman facing away from the camera. Her body language is kind of indicating that she's watching and reacting to the men. If the photograph is viewed by someone who knows the term suffrage, they will likely understand the irony in this photo. If a viewer doesn't know what suffrage means or has no background knowledge of the movement, then they will probably not be able to understand what's really happening here. The viewer who understands a photograph is not smarter than the person who doesn't understand it, but they simply don't have that background knowledge to unlock the meaning. So with a little bit of background knowledge, the definition of suffrage, for example, anyone may be able to answer low-level comprehension questions about the photo, but prior knowledge about the suffrage movement and the violence that erupted during this time will only help to deepen their understanding. So failing to understand the photo is the same as failing to understand text, which happens to students with insufficient background knowledge all the time. They may see a photograph, or they may pronounce words without error, or read fluently and answer questions about the text, but they're not really grasping the actual content. So this is just, a very intense example of this, but just a picture and an explanation of a picture could really give students some insight into the content that you are going to teach. All right, I want to provide you with one more example here, and it was a middle school study. This is a study from the 1980s where researchers asked middle school students to read a passage about a baseball game. Then they wanted the students to reenact the game with some wooden figures on a miniature baseball field. And they found that students with high reading ability but little knowledge of baseball, and those with low reading ability and little knowledge of baseball, were equally incapable. They both had the same exact outcome. They were not able to reenact the study, regardless of how well they could read. They were surprised by the results. Even the best readers struggled to recreate the events in the passage because they did not have any prior knowledge of baseball. Now, this experiment during my research kicked off 30 years of reading comprehension and background knowledge debate, but this is just another example of if the student does not have any prior knowledge of what they are reading, they are most likely not going to make the connection that you wish. Hopefully those examples helped a little bit to stress how important background knowledge is. All right, so now we know how important background knowledge is. Let's start assessing background knowledge in the classroom. All right, so assessing background knowledge, what are we looking for? It is hard to predict what students know. Students come from all different backgrounds, all different families, so they were all going to have different perspectives. They have many different personal experiences. Some students might have ridden a horse, and some students might have never seen a horse in their life. So you have to really personalize this to your learning, and you know your students better than anyone because you're with them every day. So you really want to make sure that you're honing in on what they have experienced, what they haven't. And then lastly, you'll probably hear me say this over and over again, take the pulse of your classroom. So before beginning any chapter or unit, we should find out what the students know. What students know is hard to predict, like I was explaining. The problems for students and teachers is obvious. The background knowledge is not in an equal playing field. An example would be a science textbook on stars and planets. In a typical science classroom, especially in grades 7 and up, where students come from a variety of elementary schools, you might have several students whose elementary teacher worked at a planetarium, and they were really intent on teaching students about the planets and the stars, but then you might have some students who didn't have that same experience. So you really have to start at the beginning and take inventory of what your students know. All right, so now I want to give you a few ways that you can assess this background knowledge. We're going to go over prediction guides. We're going to do a carousel walk, and lastly is free discussion, which is exactly what it sounds like. So let's go over a prediction guide first. I have an example of a prediction guide right here, and the source is attached to the link. So if you want to use that source and make a copy for yourself, please feel free. So these are also called anticipation guides. They're one of the best ways to assess students' prior knowledge of an activity. And you can kind of give them clues and motivate them, motivate their learning through some of these anticipation guides. So you can make one yourself, students, or you could have students create one. Although creating prediction guides can take some time, an easy way to accumulate some for different topics is having students write their own. So you could have the students skim the chapter and find the most important ideas related to the topic, write a few statements about each one, use some short, succinct sentences when trying to create these, play around including funny or crazy predictions, and try to avoid vocabulary specific because they might not have that background knowledge, and the vocabulary, if it's specific to the topic, might not be beneficial. It's important to make a simple agree or disagree statement. Make sure the students know that it is not graded, and then allow for differentiation, of course. So carousel walk, this is probably easier than the prediction table, but very simple here. I have a picture. You're going to take some words that might be in your upcoming unit, put them on poster board or write them on the board around your classroom, or if you're doing virtual learning, you could use a Jamboard. Write a word like Florida, Florida Keys, Chattanooga Island, things like that, and then have the students separate them into groups and simply have them write what they know about the word. It could be anything. It could be any sort of detail that they might have heard, and then set a timer and have them rotate around the classroom. When you are done, you can share out and go over everything that you've learned just from other people's experiences. Students will be able to relate better to the topic. So that is a carousel walk. And lastly, for your discussion, it is exactly what it sounds like. Easiest way to ask or find out what students know is to simply ask them. So start a class conversation about the topic that you are going to be talking about. So questions, ask leading questions like, why do you feel lighter on water than out of it? What do you know about the country of China? Just ask questions and kind of get the students talking and let them share their knowledge. All right, so those were 3 tools that you could use. And now I want to give you some exact examples about how to actually provide background knowledge. All right, so using picture books, this is not just for our younger readers. Picture books can show real life application of topics. I gave a few links here that I would like to share with you. This link has 50 nonfiction books. And this can really paint a picture for the unit that you are about to go over. So there's a little description with each book, and there's a variety of different topics in this link. So please feel free to go through this and use it as you see fit. And then I did give some specific high school examples as well, and middle school examples. So please check these out. If this happens to fall in your realm here, social studies, ELA, probability, math. So you can even paint the picture with some math stories as well. So number 1, using picture books to build background. 2, virtual field trips. These are becoming increasingly popular. I provided you with a few links here as well. 3 incredible science field trips. Common Sense Media virtual field trip apps are fantastic, and they are free. This can give them true perspective before reading their content that you are giving to them, and really just helps the students come alive. Discovery Ed has some fantastic virtual field trips as well. You don't need any kind of technology other than your computer to display, or you can assign these out to students and they can check them out on their own. Expeditions is one of my favorite. That's a VR field trip where they can physically, click on the screen and drag around. There's some other, Google Earth is another great one. There's some other tools there that are linked to these resources that you are, feel free to use. These are some awesome field trips as well. nature works, the deserts and the grasslands. There's tons of landforms. You can watch the full virtual field trip right on the website. You can also search YouTube for some appropriate field trips as well. Sensory experience. So I like to give the example when I would read to my 5th graders or 4th graders the story of James and the Giant Peach or Maniac Magee. There's nothing like actually touching, smelling, tasting, what you're reading about. James and the Giant Peach, why not bring in a peach and let them taste the peach and imagine this giant peach that James has adventures in. You can also play music, show videos, have cultural artifacts, maybe have a family come in and talk about their culture prior to experiencing the next unit in your textbook that you're going to go over. My other example is Maniac Magee. In Maniac Magee, the main character loves butterscotch crimpets. Some of my students never even heard of butterscotch crimpets, so I brought them in and let them try. So some kind of sensory activity can really go a long way in providing background knowledge. Next, I have provided a link for some free biographies. So providing a historical background can be very key to understanding, like I gave in the women's suffrage example. You might want to talk about what is going on in that time period. It makes it more relatable. It engages students in the time period specific to what you are teaching. You can even have students research that time period before you even start teaching about it. See what they find prior to you sharing information with them. So just another resource that you can use here, Ducksters and Mr. Nussbaum. They are free bios that you could have your students read before teaching your content and have them share out. And that will build background knowledge for the whole class. Mentoring and using media, my next 2 examples here. Mentoring, that's essentially just asking older students to pass on their experiences. If you're in the elementary level, maybe have your 5th graders pair up with your kindergartners and help them through a project, help them through a reading, they will naturally discuss kind of their background knowledge and provide them with examples of what they've encountered. If you're at the higher grades, maybe students that have already come through your class, have them come speak about what they took away from the unit before they started, or invite them into your Zoom room. If you have some reliable students that you would love to have them share with your current students. Multimedia, I know this is a no-brainer for everybody, but using YouTube just by showing a short little video can put the students in the right mind frame. I know Bill Nye the Science Guy is very outdated now, but my students still, up to 2 years ago, loved watching Bill Nye to start out their new unit. So a short little 20-minute video can go a long way. I gave you more links to virtual field trips here. Google Earth is a great tool that I will go over in a little bit. Flipgrid, again, Flipgrid is probably one of my favorite tools that you can use. You can create a video or create a document and share this information, have the class provide their input, and then students can watch each other's to provide some background knowledge and share their experiences. Discovery Ed and Nearpod have some content already created that you do not have to create from scratch, that you will be able to use to provide background knowledge. All right, so next, my last slide here as the examples: interviews, staff, or parent knowledge. Don't be afraid to ask parents to speak, especially in Zooms now, or come into the classroom if they are available. There are plenty of other outside resources, like I put a link down here, Skype a Scientist. There are certain professionals out there that are willing to come in and speak on different topics. I use this often in my classroom. If you can get people that that work in certain occupations that could help paint a little picture of what you're about to teach, anything like that can really engage students. Student detectives, this is very easy as well. Give them the content that you're about to teach, whether it be a textbook or an article, have them peruse through, search for visuals, allow students to write down what they think is important, share that out before you even teach it. That way they can build some kind of background knowledge if it's a foreign concept that they've never heard of before. And very similar along the lines of a textbook scavenger hunt, choose a few words for a group for your students to look for, highlight at the beginning of the chapter, choose a picture, have them dive in a little bit, do some research on their own, and you will see how valuable that can be. All right, so let's wrap up here with a few tools and some takeaways. Hopefully you took away that background knowledge is not just a frill, it is essential to comprehension and making connections and understanding big ideas. Not taking the time to build this prior knowledge is like I love this quote, throwing the ball to an inexperienced basketball player and demanding that he or she play like a pro. So if the students have never heard about this topic before and you just expect them to read it, understand it, digest it, and truly get a deep understanding of your content, it's just not going to happen because they don't have that prior knowledge. All right, so a few tools here. I provided links for Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle, very quickly, is, here's an article of how it was used for ELLs, but Edpuzzle is a very easy to use tool. Edpuzzle allows you to take a video and pause the video and insert questions. There's already created content out there for you. All you do is create an account with your Gmail. You can add content very easily, create a video, and you can search by subject, by grade level, by country. You can use a video that's already been created and questions have already been edited in, or you can copy someone else's video and add in your own questions. So it's very good to build background knowledge by inputting questions that you think your students would be able to answer or not answer. It would just kind of get them thinking about what they are about to learn. And the video completely stops and pauses until they answer the question. So it's very neat. And I have provided you a link to get directly to that. Answer Garden is just another way of implementing technology in your classroom. What pops in your head when you heard the word circus? So you would pose this question, you would share it out down here, or you could use a QR code, and all the different words that are associated with circus that your students think of would pop up. And now you have a little bit of what they know about their experiences with the circus. So just another tool, very easy to use virtually or in person. Virtual maps, I wanted to just point this out. It doesn't have to be so high tech when using technology for this kind of work. Let's say you're going to study the president, or you're learning about Mount Rushmore. I mean, I personally have never been there, but going through Google Earth, zooming in, you can find the different views. You can have satellite, you can go terrain, you can see street view. So just by going to this website and showing your students, you can get a real life glimpse to what Mount Rushmore looks like. By clicking on Street View, you can go to Mount Rushmore virtually and see exactly what you would see if you were there. So just by showing this little bit of background knowledge here, you can really build upon the students' experiences, even if they haven't ever been there before. And lastly, I just wanted to leave you with a little practice exercise, especially at all levels, really could be used. But if you want to dive in and into your content areas, there's a little outline here for a meeting. If you're meeting with your content area and you want to discuss a list of topics that you think are important, this just gives you a little outline of how to run that meeting and decide as a group how you're going to provide this background knowledge to your students. So hopefully these tools give you some ideas as to what to use when trying to build some background knowledge. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I appreciate the time you took today.